Brilliant. Have we got the slides ready to roll there? Thank you. Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me today. It's really good to be back. And I have to confess to feeling a little bit tearful in this morning's session, just hearing all the Yorkshire accents, because I'm down in Winchester. And, I'm still a northerner in exile with very fond memories of our time, not in this diocese. I've not been here, but we were up in Airedale. So having the River Aire mentioned was rather nice in the liturgy this morning. It's really good to be here. Could you just give me an idea, with a wave of your hand, if you are running a messy church already? Hurrah! Brilliant, thank you. And just wave a hand again if you're here, just kind of get a feel for something about it. Yeah, brilliant, thank you, great. Good, well, my brief is to have about 35 minutes of trying to think about the way that messy church and inherited church are working together, mostly through what are we doing about discipleship in messy church. And then we'll have about a quarter of an hour for questions and answers before we need to stop. So I hope that works. Basically, I'm trying to squash a whole day's training into half an hour. So bear with me if you would. Right, where are we now? What? Oh dear. Oh, Grandparents Festival, very exciting. Do come, it's going to be fabulous. And encourage all the people in your parishes, if you would, who've got relationships of older and younger people. You don't have to be blood grandparents, but come along and have a treat of a day out, and it's about celebrating that lovely intergenerational relationship that we have as grandparents passing on faith to grandchildren. But I can talk more about that later if you're interested. Yes, thriving as a mixed economy church, which is terribly grown-up language. And where do I need to point this? Anywhere. Are you sure? Anywhere? Could you just press the button for me? Oh, there we go. Technology. Right. With this glorious picture in the background for you to muse on, wonder where this is going. Just very, very briefly, for those people who haven't started yet, or may never start, what is Messy Church? It started in my own church, where my husband was minister, about 12 years ago in Hampshire, and it was basically coming out of a need for seeing families to want to come to church together and worship God together. And when we looked at the families standing at the bus stops in our parish, standing in the school playground, we just thought, we can't imagine why you would want to come and do church like we do it on a Sunday. I mean, what would we say to you? Come into church and sing some songs and hear a talk. And it was kind of, well, why would you when you could go shopping in Portsmouth instead? It was probably more attractive. So we wanted to start right where people were at and say, if you were going to come to our church, what would you like to do? And so we did a lot of listening and put all that into what became Messy Church. And the shape of it is basically finding a time and a day that suit the families in your neighbourhood. And for some, that's a weekday. For some, it's a weekend. And then it's a very, very warm welcome, because these are people who may never have set foot in a church before and who may have some baggage about that. A warm welcome, lots of hospitality, then about an hour of maybe 8-10 activities on a Bible theme for adults and for children and teenagers to do together. all different ways of exploring the theme, ranging from the Twinkie Twinkie, oh, let's get some pink sequins out and make a fridge magnet, through to the let's blow something up sort of thing. But all around the Bible story of the day. Then when we've done that, we gather together for a very short celebration of story, song and prayer, getting people together to not just hear about God or think about God, but to actually encounter God through worship. And we keep that short because these are people often at the very start of faith, and some of them are very young, and most of us are very hungry by then. So it's very short. And then after that, we go off and we have a meal together and sit down around tables and eat. And we thought at first that actually we would just do the first 3 bits, the welcome, the activities, and the celebration. But then we thought, then we'd have to go home and cook tea for our own families. What a pain. I wonder if we could get somebody else to do the shopping and the cooking and the washing up, and then all we'd have to do is eat together and go home, put the children in the bath, and job done. And out of that laziness, God gave us this gift of the Christian community sitting, eating together. We could wax lyrical about that for the entire afternoon, to be honest. But some messy churches say, we do messy church, but we don't do a meal. We give them a biscuit. And you want to say, how? How is this an expression of the kingdom of heaven? How is this the abundance of God? How is this the generosity of the Lord? How is this an expression of the banquet in the kingdom of heaven, giving them a biscuit? This does not work. And so something about the mealtime is very, very holy, actually, very holy. So anyway, that's what Messy Church is. Because I was working for the Bible Reading Fellowship, BRF, at the time on their schools and churches work, when people started asking about training for Messy Church, BRF took that on board, and I could do the training through my work with BRF. And then BRF started publishing books and eventually took the risk and said, we think God might be behind this. Let's see what happens if we put you on this full time, which I did in 2008. And and God is kind of running ahead, and we're lurching behind, going, wait for us, stop growing. We just need to pause and take stock. And it's such an exciting movement to be part of, because it's all about growth and life and seeing new people coming to know Jesus for themselves, which is phenomenal, very exciting. Anyway, I will stop burbling. Now, you might be wondering what this is. It has an unpronounceable name. It's actually a fly that lives on a bat. It's very unpleasant. It basically sucks the blood of the bat. And if you do a Google image search on parasites, this is one of the things that comes up. I don't recommend it because there's some really disgusting things when you look up a Google image search on parasites. And when I was given the topic for today, which is a really interesting one of the balance of inherited church and fresh expressions together, I was thinking, actually, yes, a lot of people might be under the misguided impression that a fresh expression like Messy Church could be a little bit of a parasite. You've got a nice healthy bat doing its own thing, and in comes this horrible blood-sucking parasite that just sucks all the lifeblood out of you and stops you being the thing that you're meant to be, a healthy body of a bat. And I'd want to say, actually, we're not about that. We are much more about... Oh, can you... That's the video. We'll move on, because we haven't got time for that. Can we flick on to the next bit? There we go. All right. The Goby Fish and the trigger shrimp. This is so exciting. I was sitting talking to an Australian visitor who does Messy Church over in Busselton near Perth. And I said, I want something about symbiosis. He said, you need the Goby Fish. And I don't know if you know about the Goby Fish, but it's rather fascinating. It's this spotty fish. And what it does, it's very vulnerable. It needs to kind of hide itself in a hole, but it can't dig because it doesn't have little hands. But the trigger shrimp, sometimes known as the pistol shrimp, does have a way of digging a tunnel, and it spends all its life digging a tunnel. So the trigger shrimp digs its tunnel, and the Goby fish sticks its tail in the tunnel and hides when predators come. And so it stays safe. It's really good. And the trigger shrimp, alas, isn't very good at seeing. It's practically blind. And so it kind of digs its tunnel and has to keep cleaning it out and coming up to the surface and throwing bits of rubbish out. But when a predator comes along, the Goby fish whacks the trigger shrimp with its fin, and the trigger shrimp kind of gets shoved back down into the tunnel and stays safe. And the two hold hands. It's really sweet. The trigger shrimp has a little antennae, and it stays in touch with the Goby fish throughout its life. It always has one antenna just sort of holding on to the Goby fish. And it seemed to me that actually the relationship between a messy church and its inherited church is much more like the relationship between the Goby fish and the trigger shrimp than the relationship between a revolting parasitical fly and the bat, because it's much more of a mutual giving relationship. And I've put a few things on the screen here, which I hope you can read. Some of the thoughts that I had about the way that messy churches provide some sorts of life-giving things to the local church, and the rest of the local church provides to the messy church. I've put some stuff up there, like the new life that comes through the messy church. A lot of churches are seeing lots of new families coming in through their doors because of their messy churches. That's exciting. That's really great. They're seeing opportunities for lots of lay ministry to happen, and lay ministry, as George's research has shown. So there's lots of opportunities for growth through the messy church. And there's lots of challenges of things that we've always taken for granted in the past. So Messy Church asks the questions and is being asked questions that apply to inherited church as well. And we're going to be looking at one of those questions today, of discipleship. And I think for some churches who have been looking at death and decline, and the writing has really, really genuinely been on the wall, in that they can see that their congregation is all aged 70, 80 plus, and in 20 years they are not going to be there. A bit like Abraham and Sarah in their old age with no child to carry on the family name. For those churches especially, Messy Church has given them a hope and a future, the blessing of life, of new life, which is very, very exciting. And of course, inherited church gives to the messy church. It gives it all the boring stuff so that messy church can get on and do. It gives it the structures. It gives it a way of doing DBS and safeguarding, which is terribly tedious, but absolutely necessary. Buildings. It gives it a street cred. You know, it gives it, if you belong to a local church, to your solid local Anglican church or Methodist church or Baptist church, you've got a recognition in your neighbourhood. You're not just some lunatic fringe sect coming in. You belong in your local church. You're relatively safe. And I think that's valuable. There's money, there's people, and there's the sense of wider belonging that we all get from being part of the Anglican church, of feeling that we're not just part of our local church, But we're part of a deanery, a diocese, the Anglican Communion across the country, the Anglican Communion across the world, and all the links that that provides. So it's a continual process of growth and expansion of horizons. And I think it's really significant that God has plonked Messy Church into local churches as another congregation of those churches. We talk about Messy Church being a congregation plant, really. A church plant might be a group of people who are blessed to go off and start a church elsewhere. Messy Church is much more of a group of people who are being blessed to start another congregation in the sending church. So the two are very, very closely interlinked and living in this Goby Fish, trigger shrimp symbiosis very closely. And when it works, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, galloping on. Yes, messy discipleship. One of the questions that is asked of Messy Church and has been asked from the word go is, yes, you've got people coming, that's all very well, yes, that's fine, but are you making disciples? Or how are you moving people on? And it's a really good question, a brilliant question. It's what we're called to do by Jesus, it's about the Great Commission. We need to do this as churches. But let's ask it of Inherited Church as well. Messy Church is only 12 years old. It's being run by lay people like me. We haven't got a clue. Church has been going for a lot longer. Let's ask each other the questions. Let's be accountable to each other and use the challenges that we're happy to give to Messy Church to challenge and help the rest of the local church to grow as well. And that's not meant aggressively at all. This is part of this symbiosis. It's a chance to look at discipleship again and say, well, is discipleship simply about turning up to church on a Sunday? Is that what it's all about? Let's see. So, here we go. We're on a journey with this. We're on a journey. There are lots of critical friends with us on this journey, which is great. And George at the Church Army and his team have been critical friends from the start. And his research has shown, he's unpicked some of the stuff about messy churches in particular for us, and has shown a lot of the challenges that we need to face, most of which are listed on there. There's also Bob Jackson. Thank you. And as you can see, another critical friend who actually says, come on, we've got to actually start communicating the Christian message intentionally. We can't mess about with this. Unless Messy Church is about helping people to catch a genuine Christian faith, it's hard to see it having a deep and lasting impact. So we have all these critical friends to help us on the way. I would also like to say we are on a journey, we are learning, we are becoming, we are on the way. We don't have all the answers yet. We can't even make the clicker work. So what I'm going to do is just give you the 5 headlines of where we are at the moment in Messy Church discipleship, with a real sense of this is as far as we've got. Sorry, we can't give you all the answers, but these are just the points we've got to in our understanding of where Messy Church discipleship is going. And as I look at each one, we'll look at the implications for a Messy Church and an Inherited Church, how they might take that on board and deal with that issue in each case. So, first one is, we're starting a long way back. So it's going to take a long time. And any of you who've done research into any sort of fresh expressions will know that this isn't exclusive to messy churches. This is true across the board, that making disciples takes a long time. It's particularly true, I think, of messy churches. I'm going to come onto a graph. I'm not good at graphs because I'm a linguist, not a mathematician, and I suspect there are other people in this room who don't do graphs. So this is a short story which then illustrates the graph that we're about to look at about this taking a long time, okay? So imagine, if you would, a wilderness. This is a cabbage field of Lincolnshire. It's wilderness enough. And there's a family crossing the wilderness, and they're tired, they're exhausted, they have a lot thrown at them across this wilderness. It's hard work being a family today. But there, in the distance, they see an oasis. Hurrah! Rest, shelter, refreshment. Brilliant. But camped out at the oasis already is a tribe. And the family doesn't know if the tribe is friendly or hostile. But someone from the tribe comes over and makes overtures of friendship, and the family are enticed to come and sit down and eat with them and hear about the journey that the tribe is on. And the tribe is going to, and this is where, if we had the drums going, we'd have a drum roll, sort of, the tribe is going to the city. And the family hear about this journey that the tribe is on and think, ooh, actually, we've got nowhere better to go. We might as well join them. It sounds quite exciting, this city that they're heading off to. So the tribe and the family head off across the wilderness towards the city. And one marvellous day, they arrive. And one group, some of the tribe, some of the family, settle down there. They've arrived, they've made it, they've got the t-shirt, and they settle down in the suburbs, and they've made it to the city. They go no further. And some of them get a bit kind of cynical about the whole experience, because actually, is this as good as it gets? All that fuss about the city, and this is it. Whereas others from the family and from the tribe go on into the city further and further, seeing its pubs and its clubs and its parks and its shops and its all the things that there are to do there. And the more they go in, the more they realise there is to discover. It's not my best story, I admit. However, it does work very well for illustrating, ta-da, the Engel scale. It's great that it's Saturday, because you'll be probably going to church tomorrow, and you can just drop into casual conversation over coffee. Oh yes, we just did the Engel scale yesterday, and it sounds terribly impressive. But basically, this is a simplified version. A simplified version is, this is kind of showing how people come to understand the things of God in their heads. So they might have no knowledge of God right at the bottom, at -7. They might gain knowledge of God as they go up the scale, find out more and more about God and the church and so on, and finally get to 0, ta-da, where they become a Christian, and then they can carry on growing in knowledge of God. Yeah? We can add on to that. We can add on to that. We will. Oh, the tension is killing me. The grey matrix. Oh, if the Engel scale going up and down is about knowledge, head knowledge of God, the grey matrix is about your heart stuff. So it's roughly how open or closed people are to God. So on this scale, if you had somebody who was a theological expert, an academic, who knew everything there was to know about Leviticus, but was an atheist, they might be up in the top left-hand corner. So an awful lot of knowledge, but very closed to the things of God. Whereas somebody who was perhaps a 5-year-old who regularly prays, sees angels, talks to God, but has never actually been anywhere near the Bible or church or any organised religion, they might be very open to the things of God, so way over to this side, but be right down at the bottom of the Engel scale. Okay, so they'd be in the bottom right-hand corner. Does that make sense? Yeah? Now, where it comes in with messy church is it gets messy. Here's our family's journey, starting in the bottom left-hand corner, wandering around, probably not knowing much about the things of God, because we're in a very secular country, and probably quite closed off to the things of God, because our reputation is not good in many places, and people tend to think church equals boring. So, probably down in that corner, but they might come across the messy church, or perhaps another fresh expression, or your local church, or some lovely people from your church, which is a bit like the oasis. And they might join in with that, come along to your messy church for a while. They probably don't know intellectually an awful lot more about faith, but they are getting warmer and warmer towards the things of God, because, frankly, Mrs. Bloggs has sat down with your revolting 5-year-old and taught them how to knit, and is the only person who's shown any patience with that child. So that says something about this community. And then as people grow in faith, perhaps belong to the community more, learn more, belong more, participate more, then we hope and pray that they get to that 0 point of becoming a Christian, ta-da! And then there's the choice of whether you stop, and that's all you do, you get baptized, and then there's nowhere else to go, or whether we carry on learning and growing and going deeper into God as Christians. I like this graph because what it says to me is, for example, somebody coming along to an alpha course might well be at, say, -3 on this scale. And something like the alpha course moves them up, does a brilliant job of getting them from -3 to 0. A lot of people become Christians through something like alpha, Christianity Explored, whatever it might be. But that person has already got to that particular point up the scale. With Messy Church, what we're finding is that people are coming into our churches and feeling part of them and participating in them and often being on the team of them, but they are way down at -7. So actually Messy Churches may well do a fabulous job of moving people up that scale just the same distance as an alpha course. We might get them from -7 to -4, hurrah! But we can't actually measure that because they've not become a Christian, they are becoming Christians. They wouldn't say that they've become a disciple, but they are being discipled, and I would say, but you might disagree, I would say are already on a discipleship journey. So all this is about really. It's about becoming and growing and being a Christian, a disciple. So I think that gives us an idea of this is going to take an awfully long time. And an image that we sometimes use in Messy Church is, people say, oh, it's about sowing seeds, isn't it? I say, well, yes, it is. But it's also about ploughing the field for some people so that the seed can be sown so that we get a harvest. And actually, for a lot of people who are way down at the bottom of that graph, it's actually about taking the stones out of the field so that we can plough, so that we can sow seeds, so that there can be a harvest. We're starting way back. And there are hundreds of stories from Messy Churches which graphically illustrate the need to just take things a step at a time. But we don't have time. Just pray a little, would you? Hey, so what does that observation say to us about how might we be a really good symbiosis with Messy Church and Inherited Church? And I think it's some of these things. that, can I read it? I think as messy churches, if you're running a messy church, we actually need to put a lot of work in at the start about helping our inherited church understand what to expect. And the amount of people who say, I still get people saying to me, why aren't they coming to church? And I hear the groans. But trying to work on that before you even start is the best idea. Some people will never hear it. They will never understand that you're actually being church in the messy church. But doing as much as you can to help people who have perhaps a more entrenched view of church than you, what you're actually going to achieve with your messy church is really, really important. And helping people to understand the name, because a lot of people in inherited church say, oh, I don't like the name, church shouldn't be messy. But trying to say to them, it's not about making our building, our beautiful building, it's not about making that messy, it's not about disorder, it's about Jesus going out to the people whose lives are a mess, people who aren't perfect, people like us who haven't got perfect children and perfect relationships and perfect homes, but people who might not feel good enough to come to church. It meets them where they are, just like Jesus did with all the people that he went and spent time with. So a little bit of understanding about the name. I think we need to keep on communicating, keep on sharing the stories of messy church in inherited church. So share things in the parish magazine, bring your PowerPoints into inherited church and show the photos, bring the activities, if you've done some artwork, bring that into church as well. Keep on sharing the stories. And inherited church, we need to allow time. We need to allow time before we say, why aren't they joining the planned giving scheme, basically. So there we go. A few things. Thank you. Second thing we're learning. This is going to be, I'm going to speed up now. Is that all right? I will talk even faster. Sorry. This is about relationships. It's not about fancy programs. It's not about the beautiful Messy Church discipleship course. Discipleship in Messy Church is about relationships with Jesus and with each other. And, oh dear, we've got Rublev's icon there, showing this relationship, this friendship, this family right at the heart of our faith. And I think that is a model for us to keep in mind when we're thinking about discipleship in Messy Church. It costs far more to become friends with somebody than it does to encourage them to go on a course. It will take over my life, my time. It might change how I am as a person. It means I have to receive as well as give. I lose power by becoming a friend to somebody. Whereas if they're on a course, that's easy. I'm in control. They're boxed into a section of my life, which I can just shut the door on when it's over. Friendship and relationship are right at the heart of what we're doing in messy churches. So what does that mean? It might mean that you actually say to people in your congregation on a Sunday, I know you don't like children, I know you don't want to get messy, could you come and just be at Messy Church? Just sit and chat with people. You are brilliant at talking and listening and pastoral stuff. We need people who are just going to come and make friends with people, because we don't have time. We're knee-deep in toilet rolls and googly eyes. Can you come and just sit and be with those people? Lots of prayer. We need to embed our messy churches in prayer and give opportunities for prayer at the messy church for people to learn how to do it. We need to just think, have we actually got relationships sussed in our Sunday church as well, or not? We need to bear with each other in love. We need to really look after each other across the congregations as a family and try not to see each other as parasites or as messy churches might see the Sunday church as kind of the brakes on a car, stopping you doing what you want to do. We need to work together. We need to bear with each other in love and respect what the different congregations are doing. And we need to think about relationships within our team. And there's a whole lot on the Messy Church website about becoming disciples through the team. That's a really interesting strategy to work on intentionally. Team. This is a third thing that we're finding. Yes, we're doing Messy Church for the families who don't know Christ yet. That's amazing. The side effect is that this is having a radical effect on the discipleship of the people who are putting on the Messy Church. And I remember one bloke at a training event who couldn't stop asking questions. He was on fire. And at the end of the session, the vicar said to me, he wouldn't have been like that 6 months ago. He just came along and sat in the congregation. But since he started serving in Messy Church, he's just been on fire. He's God has just picked him up and taken him somewhere different. He's completely changed. If we let it, this service, this opportunity to share the gospel, changes us completely. Just like good hosts are changed by their guests, then this is a chance for us to grow in Christ as well, which is very exciting. Now, oh dear, I would tell you about the Bishop of Wellington in New Zealand, but we don't have time. The problem is, grab me in the tea break or something. The problem is, as this story from Suffolk illustrates, the problem can be that Messy Church teams have so much to do in inherited church, they haven't got time to invest in the discipleship of a Messy Church. So they are always dependent on the inherited church for their own discipleship, and they always end up doing Messy Church at the families who come. And if we could release them from some of their responsibilities to keep Sunday church on the road and allow them to belong truly and draw their own resources from the Messy Church, we might see some really exciting things happening. But that's quite a challenge for us. So I think, what can we learn? I think it's about, we need to bless the people of our church who are going, do you know, I'm finding God much more in Messy Church than I'm finding him in the liturgy on a Sunday. Can I just concentrate on the Messy Church now? Can I really put all my energies into that? We need to bless that attitude, not go, oh no, we're losing people from our church because they're going over to Messy Church. Let's bless that and see where God is taking that person and our church as a result. We need to, all of us, we need to be open to the old ways of being disciples. So Messy Churches can draw from this wonderful inheritance that we have of worship in our inherited churches. We can sit down together and say, what is helpful to us in our discipleship journey that comes from our inherited church? How can we reinvent that for our Messy Church families? So if it's been really helpful to you to have been part of a small group of friends looking at the Bible together in your inherited church, how might you reinvent that for the families from your Messy Church? How might that work, for example? And being open to new ways of being disciples. Perhaps people in inherited church can look at what the ways that we're learning in Messy Church. Just 2 more points. We need to reimagine the extras. Messy Church is usually just once a month, so that gives a whole 30 days in a month where possibly people are doing no discipleship whatsoever. So some Messy Churches are just starting to look at doing extras in the rest of the month, messy extras of one sort or another. And the challenge here, I think, is are we going to stick with the values of Messy Church, or are we going to go back to inherited church values? And what I mean by that comes down to, basically, when we've got a group of people who want to move on in Christ, do we say to them, well, the only way you can do that is in age-segregated groups. So we'll have an adult discipleship course and a youth discipleship course and a child discipleship course, and we'll have people with blonde hair doing a discipleship course over here and blue eyes over there, and go back to what we do, admittedly, exaggeratedly, in inherited church, and say it's all about what you learn cerebrally, and the best way to do that is in age-segregated groups? Or do we say, one of the values of Messy Church is being all age. Whatever we do as an extra, we are going to do it all age. If it kills us, we're going to do it all age. Because that way we are learning not just the cerebral stuff, we are learning the life stuff as well. How to look out for people who are very, very different from us in age and attitude, maybe in social background, maybe in intellect. It's a huge challenge, I think, for churches to really take the all-age thing seriously. The different ways of learning that aren't just about the formal learning, they're not just about the head stuff, but they're about apprenticeship learning, having time to learn from someone just a bit further along the road from me, the informal learning, the social learning as well, what do you pick up just by being part of a community of disciples? What do you learn non-verbally from just hanging out with people who are following Christ? Interesting, isn't it? I'm going to shut up in a minute. No, we'll have to gallop through that. Next one. Okay, and this is the last one. It's all about doing Messy Church well. And this, I think, is a huge consolation for those of us who are sitting there going, I run a messy church. I haven't got time to do messy extras. I can't possibly do that. I've got enough to do already. What if that 2 hours a month were done as church, really, really as church? What if we really looked at the values of Messy Church and said, we are really, really going to make this as Christ-centred as we can. Everything that we do, from the moment we start planning, through to the prayer group that's going on during it, through to every single helper at every single table, through to the people in the kitchen and the way that they serve the meal, everything is going to be for Christ and in Christ and leading towards Christ. What if we said that? How would that transform what we do? And we could look at the other 4 values as well: being all age, creativity, celebration, hospitality, and trying to bring those values into every part of Messy Church to make the actual Messy Church as much of a disciple-making experience as we can. That's exciting. When that goes on, then God is really, really at work. So, I'll flick on. Back to our fish and our shrimp. I think what excites me about Messy Church is that it is so firmly embedded in the local church, bringing life into the local church and drawing life from the local church. It's not trying to be something way out there on the edge. It's something firmly loved and rooted in the people who are already there. And there's this huge, strong relationship through the helpers and the team from inherited church into the Messy Church and back again. And when we get that relationship right, then we're cooking with custard and things hold together. So I'll just flick on and leave that up as the final screen. I'm sorry, it's been such a gallop. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in the Messy Church network. We're drawing in stories all the time. We're looking at, all these kind of exciting things that are going on. We don't have easy answers. to this discipleship question. We're on a journey with it. In December, we've got a group of people coming together with us at BRF to actually say, do we need to take things on to a different level now? Has the time come for that? So maybe if I were to come again in January, I'd be saying, ooh, now we have all the answers. But maybe not. I think this is a journey that every church goes on for itself. But with Christ at the centre, I don't think we're going to go far wrong. So we have approximately 2 minutes, I'm so sorry, for any questions or thoughts or comments. So we haven't got a roving mic, but if you've got a question and can bellow it out, I'll repeat it over the mic. So has anyone got anything you'd like to question? Yes. So the question is, does it rely on people already in the church to invite outside people to come along to the messy church? Do they actually understand? Do you mean, do the people outside understand what it is? Well, good question. I think this is, I know we all hate the word brand, but actually this is where a brand is actually very helpful, because what we're finding anecdotally is that people actually are recognising the brand. They've got nothing to do with church, but they know the logo. It's not exactly a subtle logo. So it does get recognised. And people out there who have nothing to do with church actually say, oh, Messy Church, yeah, my cousin goes to one of those in Aberdeen, or my uncle in Melbourne goes to one of those. So it's kind of gossiped around. But I would say that yes, the team needs to keep on that edge of invitation the whole time, because it's so easy to get inward looking, but pushing out to the edges and saying, how can we use social media to get our message out there? How can we use posters? How can we use our contacts in the playground? How can we build on what's going on in the church toddler group? How can we work with the Brownies or the Guides or the Scouts or the Duke of Edinburgh's Award? How can we get out to the big event in the park that our village is doing? Could we have a Messy Church thing at that? So all the time it's looking for the edges. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there are any Messy Churches that have gone on to be a weekly Messy Church. So truly a church in its own right.
Oh, that's an interesting phrase. Truly a church. I wonder where it says you have to be weekly to be a church in its own right. But it's a challenging question. I would say that actually being once a month is a good regularity for a messy church. It's good for the team because they don't die. They can do it with, and have their gin and tonic afterwards and recover. It also gives them time to reflect on what they've done. So it's not just a sausage machine. It's a month gives you time to think, oh, how can we change things and develop them and implement them better? It's also quite good for people who are right at the start of faith, because they can prioritise once a month, whereas once a week would be too much for many of them coming. So I would gently push back on the, truly being church. Have there been ones that are once a week? Yes, a few. How do they do it? In Southampton, there's a lovely vicar called Jane, and she said, oh, we did our first messy church. And we said to the mums at the end, did you enjoy that? And they all said, yep, we'll be back next week. And we didn't like to say, no, it's only once a month. So now we've got to do it every week. But they're managing it, and it's not a big church. They're managing it because their team is so committed to it. But for the vast majority of messy churches, it's once a month. And a few do it less. I would say that I think once a month is probably the limit of what I would call church in terms of regularity. But that's my own opinion. Some people do it as an event at Christmas, at Easter, at harvest, and that's how they start and sometimes how they carry on. But yeah, so yes. Is Mark here? Oh, there you are. Oh, right. You stop me when you need to stop me.
Not yet, Mark, not yet. I've got a question. It was said this morning that a mature church has sacraments, and therefore the implication may have been that an immature church doesn't. So, messy weddings, messy baptisms, messy funerals. Are you there yet?
And messy communion goes in with that. Yes to all of those, interestingly, which seems very improbable, but is actually the case. For my sins, I'm on the Liturgical Commission of the Church of England. Oh, yes. And we've got a day to sit down with them and talk through the issues around Anglican communion for messy church, and the language that we're expected to use, the liturgy that we're expected to use, and the permissions that we can have. So watch this space for that one. But a lot of messy churches are doing communion. Loads of baptisms. If you go on the website, there is a lot of anecdotal stuff about, oh, we had a messy baptism, we had a messy confirmation, the bishop came and got messy with us. Yeah, a lot of that going on. Sometimes that's a clash time because the minister can sometimes say, you can't get baptised in messy church, you have to come on a Sunday morning and be baptised in real church. So that's going on. Several messy church leaders have met and fallen in love at messy church and have insisted on an element of mess in their marriage, such as getting everybody to make little favour bags that go on the tables as an activity during the time. And funerals, there was tragically a much loved messy church leader in Leicestershire who died of cancer when she was a young mum, and all through her illness she actively encouraged the messy church families to come and sit with her, read her psalms, be part of her illness. And when she died, they had a funeral which included playing musical chairs afterwards, and being a real all-age gathering for the folk there, because she was so much part of their community. So it's happening. A chance to reinvent those beautiful, valuable sacraments, perhaps, but yes, it is happening. Okay.
My brain is currently doing its usual job of fizzing around. We have an event on a Wednesday where the church is open, and we've started to attract large numbers of non-church families to that in the afternoon, and it's sort of open and they do all sorts of things. And currently the colouring is vaguely, there are some Christian colouring pages amongst other things, and I'm just trying to work out whether, would you say that messy church has to start as messy church, or could it be messy before it's necessarily messy church? Is it something that you could emerge from something like that, or do you think it needs to have its own starting point to say this is church, or is it can I pre-messy?
I think God works in all sorts of different ways with different congregations and different leaders, different settings, and I think you will know. You know, this isn't for me to say. I think messy church may be the best thing to come out of that. You might be coming up with something even more beautiful that's right for your place. You know, so yes, but yeah. Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all very much indeed. Wonderful.